So the next chapter is about heredity and evolution, chapter number 9 of class 10th. So what is heredity? Heredity, also called inheritance or biological inheritance, is the passing on of traits from parents to their offspring, either through sexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. Okay, the offspring cells or organism acquire the genetic information of their parents. The study of heredity in biology is genetics. Okay, we can see here the image of human heredity, how evaluate this. So what is evolution now? So in biology, evolution is the change, okay, in our characteristic of species over several generations and release on the process of natural selection. So the theory of evolution is based on the idea that all species are related and gradually change over time. So we can see here the changes in human by evolution. Okay, so the next is accumulation of variations during reproduction. The variation accumulates and pass on the more and more individuals with each generation. The diversity is small in the case of a sexual reproducing organism, as it is caused by only errors of DNA copies mechanism. We can see here the image. So the next is the transmission of characters or traits of parent into their offspring children is termed as heredity. Okay, genetic is the study of heredity and other variations. Those organisms that are identical copies of one another are termed as clones. They are exact carbon copies of each other. Okay, the next is an inherited trait is a feature or characteristic of an organism that has been passed on to it in its genes. This transmission of parent traits to their offspring always follows train principles or laws. The study of law how inherited traits are passed on is called genetics. Okay, so the next is in summary laws of inheritance. Mendel postulated that genes characteristic means are inherited as pair of alleles, trait that behave in a dominant and receive pattern. Alleles segregate into gametes such that each gamete is equally like to receive either one of the two alleles present in a diploid individual. So the next is Gregor John Mendel. About Gregor John Mendel. So Gregor John Mendel was an Australian monk who discovered the basic principle of heredity, okay, through experiment in his garden. Mendel's observation became the foundation of modern genetics and study of heredity, and he is widely considered a pioneer in the field of genetics. So next is this is the image of Mendel. Next image of how they experiment in tea plants, and the next is the trait expressed is known as a dominant trait. The dominant gene is represented by a capital letter, the gene which decides the appearance of an organism. Only in the presence of another identical gene is called a recessive gene. The trait expressed is known as a recessive trait. The next is we can see here the image about cross fertilization, self fertilization. So next are also the images. So next is about sex determination. So takes place with the help of genes inherited from parents. Particularly genes are present on chromosomes in the nucleus of cell, the biological process through which sexual characteristic of an individual develops, making it a male individual or female individual, is called sex determination. Okay, this is the sex determination. Here we can see the image example of sex determination in human beings. If XX make, it will become a female, and if XY, it will become a male. Okay, so the next is Lamarck was the first scientist. About Lamarck, okay, Lamarck was the first scientist who gave the theory of evolution. He gave the theory of inheritance of acquired characters. Later on, Charles Darwin come and gave the theory of natural selection or Darwinism. According to his theory, evolution occurs through natural selection. Okay, the next is genetic variation can be caused by mutation, which can create entirely new alleles in a population. Random mating, random fertilization, and recombination between homologous chromosomes during meiosis, which reshuffles alleles within an organism offspring. So next, here we can see variation in a population, inherited and otherwise. Next, we can discuss about acquired trait. So the acquired trait are the one that a person developed during his lifetime. These are not passed from one generation to another. On the other hand, inherited traits are present in the person since the time of his birth and are passed on from one generation to another. Okay, so there are the about the scientist of Carlos Robert Darwin, F.R.S. Fogg, okay, was an English naturalist, okay, geologist and biologist. Best known of his contribution to the science of evolution, his proposition that all species of life have descended over time from common ancestors, is now widely accepted and considered a functional concept in science. Next, we will talk about the earliest known as life forms on earth are putative fossilized microorganisms found in hydrothermal vent precipitates that may have lived as early as 4.28 billion years ago. Relatively soon after the ocean formed 4.41 billion years ago, and not long after the formation of the earth 4.54 billion years ago. So the next is speciation is the evolutionary so process by which populations evolve to become distinct species. The biologist orator F. Cook coined the term in 1906 for cladogenesis, the splitting of lineage as opposed to anagenesis, phyletic evolution with lineages. So the next is classification is the method of arrange the organism into different groups of the basis of their similarities and difference. Evolution is the process in which variation is introduced into the genetic constitution. The properties of an feature of an organism are controlled by the genetic material. Okay, so the next is we can talk about we use living species to track, okay, to trace evolutionary relationship, but organisms which once lived and do not exist anymore also have a story to tell about evolution. They can be used for tracing the evolutionary relationship between species. Fossils are one of the examples. Next, here we can talk about fossils. A fossil is an preserved remains impression to track any one living thing from the past geological age. Examples include bone cells, exoskeleton, stone imprints of animal or microbes, object preserved in amber, hair, petrified wood, oil, coal, and DNA remain. Okay, so next about fossils. So fossils form layer by layer as the rocks, due to environmental conditions, broke into pieces and becoming sand. When some organism comes in between the layer of the sand or soil, it remains within them a part its fossil is formed. Here we can see. Next is, so the next is we can talk about evolution by stages. Okay, evolution by stages is said become the process of evolution had took place over a long period of time. The complex organs are created bit by bit over. So generation, increasing complexity of organs. There are some organs in the human body which are present in the reduced form and do not perform any function. Here we can see the examples. So next we will talk about molecular phylogenetic is the branch of phylogeny that analyze genetic heredity molecule differences predominantly in DNA sequence to gain information on an organism evolutionary relationship. From these analyses, it is possible to determine the process by which diversity among species has been achieved. Next, we will talk about species adapt to the condition available in their environments too. So, older and simple species live on quite effective quite effective. The only progressive trend in evolution seem to be that more and more complex body designs have emerged over time. This is the reason why evolution is not equated with progress. Okay, so the next is about human evolution is the evolutionary process that led to be the emergence of anatomically modern human, beginning with the evolutionary history of primates in particular genus Homo and leading to the emergence of Homo sapiens as a distinct species of the hominid family, the great apes.